Hello everyone, dear students. Today we are going to discuss the first chapter of your history class 10th ICSE. In this chapter we are going to discuss the first war of independence, or also called as the uprising of 1857. डियर स्टूडेंट्स, ये चैप्टर आप लोगों के बोर्ड एग्ज़ाम पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट होने वाला है। इस चैप्टर में हम लोग बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट्स डिस्कस करेंगे जो कि आप लोगों के बोर्ड एग्ज़ाम के लिए 10 मार्क्स का क्वेश्चन इसमें डिस्कस होने वाला है। हाउ टू राइट द आंसर्स दैट ऑल्सो वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस इन दिस चैप्टर। तो आइए चलो शुरू करते हैं इस चैप्टर को। द फर्स्ट वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस, ऑल्सो कॉल्ड एज द अपराइजिंग ऑफ 1857। तो चलो शुरू करते हैं। In this chapter, first of all, we are going to discuss the most important topic, that is the causes of the first war of independence. हम लोग इस चैप्टर में सबसे पहला पॉइंट जो डिस्कस करने वाले हैं, that is the causes of the first war of independence or the uprising of 1857. स्टूडेंट्स, आप लोग जानते हो द ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी अपने इंडिया में आई थी सिर्फ ट्रेड करने के लिए, बट बाद में यहाँ पर उन्होंने अपना एनेक्सेशन शुरू किया एंड देन दे बिकेम द रूलर्स ऑफ इंडिया। तो इन रूलर्स बनने के जो चक्कर में इन लोगों ने जो अपने यहाँ पर जो कुछ भी किया, उस वजह से हमारे इंडियंस जो थे इनका एग्रेशन हुआ। इन लोगों ने बहुत सारा रिवोल्ट किया। बहुत सारे रिवोल्ट्स होते होते एक सबसे इम्पॉर्टेंट जो रिवोल्ट हुआ था 1857 का, इसको हम लोग यहाँ पर सबसे पहले डिस्कस करने वाले हैं। तो ये रिवोल्ट्स में हम लोग 4 इम्पॉर्टेंट कॉजेज़ देखने वाले हैं। The first cause of the uprising of 1857 is the political causes. The political causes means what? That you have to remember it with the one trick or one keyword we can say. The keyword for this is the ruler's cause. Political cause can also be remembered as the ruler's cause. India के जो rulers हुआ करते थे, they were not happy with the British. Why they were not happy with the British? That is the most important point we are going to discuss in the political causes. तो political causes यहाँ पर हम लोग एक example लेते हैं सबसे पहले, that is the doctrine of lapse. Under this doctrine of lapse, the kingdom which do not have the natural heir to the throne, it was annexed by the British. ये क्या हुआ था कि इसमें in the year 1852 गवर्नर जनरल लॉर्ड डलहौजी इसने एक पॉलिसी इंट्रोड्यूस किया। इन पॉलिसी के अंदर उस पॉलिसी को नाम दिया गया डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ लैप्स। बाय दिस पॉलिसी दोज रूलर्स वे आर नॉट हैविंग द नेचुरल हेयर टू द थ्रोन, इट मीन्स जिनका अपना लड़का खुद का लड़का नहीं था, यानी कि थ्रोन के लिए कोई राजकुमार नहीं हुआ करता था। प्रीवियसली व्हाट वाज हैपनिंग, those rulers who were not having the heir to the throne, they were adopting a child, and that adopted child was becoming the next ruler. But Britishers had devised this policy by which the ruler, which if not having the natural heir to the throne, it was lapsed to the Britishers. आप लोगों को पता है इस पॉलिसी के अंदर बहुत सारे स्टेट जो थे ब्रिटिशर्स ने एनेक्स कर लिए। इसमें से वन ऑफ द एग्जाम्पल इज ऑफ रानी लक्ष्मीबाई। रानी लक्ष्मीबाई हैज़ लॉस्ट द झांसी, and because of that she was not happy with the British. Not only Rani Lakshmibai, but the other rulers also were annexed. Other rulers states were also annexed. Another example you can take here, the annexation of the Awadh in the year 1856. It was the Awadh, it was ruled by the Nawab, and the Britishers have given the reason for the annexation of this Awadh that the Nawab is unable to rule properly. The Nawab is not ruling the state properly, he is unable to rule the state properly. So under the alleged misrule, under the pretext of alleged misrule, the Britishers have annexed the Awadh in the year 1856. So because of this annexation of the Awadh, it has angered the Nawab and the nobles of the Awadh. Another example you can take, that is of the emperor of the India that time, that was Bahadur Shah. Bahadur Shah Zafar was insulted by the Britishers when the Britishers decided to end the Mughal dynasty. So the Mughal dynasty was completely ended. All the powers of the Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah were taken over by the Britishers, and he was just made the pensioner. उसको सिर्फ पेंशनर बोल के रखा गया. So because of this has angered the Bahadur Shah. Then another important point you can take the example, what happened because of all this. You can take some other examples also. For the policy of expansion, Britishers have adopted the policy of expansion. Under that policies, they have devised various policies to capture the Indian rulers or the Indian states. We can take one of the example, that is the rulers of a particular state, if they sign a particular agreement with the Britishers, a pact with the Britishers, so that state also was going under the British East India Company. For example, in this we can have one of the example, subsidiary alliance. In this, under this subsidiary alliance, what was happening? The ruler which has signed the subsidiary alliance with the Britishers, ultimately they were becoming the puppets in the hands of the British East India Company. The rulers of that particular state were becoming the puppets. So because of this, all the rulers in India, those who were affected because of the expansionist policy of the British rule, they were affected and that were angered. So because of this, what was the result of this? The Indian rulers and the princes lost power and became hostile towards the British rule. So this was the first important cause of the uprising of 1857, called as the political cause. Second important cause is the socio-religious cause. So under this socio-religious cause, we are going to discuss how the Indians were affected, their religious sentiments were affected. So because of that, the Indian religious people, Orthodox people, also rose into rebellion against the British. So how it happened? Let's see. इंटरफेरेंस विद द सोशल कस्टम्स लाइक द सती कस्टम. आप लोगों को पता होगा हमारे इंडिया में सती कस्टम हुआ करता था. व्हाट वाज दिस सती कस्टम? दैट इफ द वुमेन हैज़ लॉस्ट हर हस्बैंड, इफ हस्बैंड डाइज, तो उस हस्बैंड की डेथ होने के बाद उस वुमेन को शी हैज़ ऑल्सो बर्न हर सेल्फ, शी हैज़ टू बर्न हर सेल्फ अलाइव ऑन द फायर ऑफ द हस्बैंड. चिता जो होती है हस्बैंड की, उसके साथ खुद को जलाना पड़ता था. And that was a very bad custom. Even that time it was not considered as the bad custom because it was followed since the ancient period. So this sati custom was banned by the Britishers. It was banned by a lord, that time the Governor General of India, who was the Lord William Bentinck. He was the Governor General that time, and he has banned the sati custom in the year 1829. So because of the banning of the sati custom, the religious sentiments of the Indians Orthodox had been affected. So because of that, this was one of the reason because of which the Indian people were not happy. Then the another policy of the racial discrimination. Britishers have adopted the policy of racial discrimination. Indians were considered of the low race and the Britishers were considering themselves as the high race. And because of that, they were making the differences with the Indians at the various places. And because of that, these racial discriminations also have angered the Indian people, and because of that also they have rose into the rebellion. Then activities of the missionaries. Christian missionaries were allowed to preach the Christianity in India by the British East India Company. और इन मिशनरीज़ ने अपने इंडिया में ये क्रिश्चियन एक्टिविटी जो है टू स्प्रेड द क्रिश्चियनिटी, दैट एक्टिविटीज़ वर स्टार्टेड and there were the conversions of the Indians into the Christianity. So Orthodox Hindus, they were not happy with these conversions of the Indians to the Christianity. It was because it was affecting their religious matters. So because of that, those people, those who were considered as the Orthodox people, they were not happy with these Christian missionaries activities, and because of that they were not happy. So another cause under the socio-religious cause we can consider, that is the taxing the religious places. इंडिया के जो रिलीजियस प्लेसेस होते हैं, आप लोगों को पता है हमारे इंडिया में बहुत सारे रिलीजियस प्लेसेस है जहाँ पर लोग पिलग्रिम के लिए जाते हैं. यहाँ पर ब्रिटिशर्स ने क्या किया था कि यहाँ पर टैक्सेस लगा दिए थे. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द इंडियन पीपल वेर नॉट हैप्पी विद दिस टैक्सेस ऑल्सो, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट दिस वेर सम ऑफ द एग्जाम्पल्स ऑफ द सोशो रिलीजियस कॉजेस. So because of these socio-religious causes also, the Indian people were not happy. So this was the second cause of the uprising of 1857. Third cause is the economic cause. तो आइए देखते हैं economic causes, how it were responsible for the uprising of 1857. In this first point we are going to discuss is the exploitation of economic resources. Dear students, आप लोगों को याद रखना है कि India was one of the richest countries in the world, because we had so many large number of resources in our country, and Britishers have started the economic exploitation of these resources. As much possible resources they were taking it to their countries, and because of that it was affecting the economy of India. Indian economy was going down, and because of that the Indian people were not happy. So इकोनॉमिक एक्सप्लॉयटेशन ऑफ द वेरियस रिसोर्सेज, ये सभी रिसोर्सेज जो है इंडिया से ब्रिटेन लेके जा रहे थे और वहाँ पर इस रिसोर्सेज को यूज़ कर रहे थे, तो अपने इंडिया के रिसोर्सेज यहाँ से कम हो रहे थे, तो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट इट वाज वन ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक कॉज ऑफ द अपराइजिंग ऑफ 1857. अनदर इकोनॉमिक कॉज इज़ द ड्रेन ऑफ वेल्थ. हमारी इंडिया की जो वेल्थ है ये पूरी ब्रिटेन जा रही थी. वेरियस पॉलिसीज दे हैव अडॉप्टेड टू ड्रेन द वेल्थ ऑफ इंडिया. उनका सबसे मेन एम था कि इंडिया की एज मच पॉसिबल वेल्थ हैज़ टू बी टेकन टू द ब्रिटेन इन द डिफरेंट वेज. सो टैक्सेस लगाए गए थे, बहुत सारे चेंजेस किए गए थे, इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम में चेंजेस किए गए थे, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द वेल्थ ऑफ इंडिया वॉज ड्रेन टू द ब्रिटेन. अनदर इम्पॉर्टेंट कॉज इज़ द डिके ऑफ द कॉटेज इंडस्ट्रीज एंड द हैंडीक्राफ्ट्स. स्टूडेंट्स, आप लोगों को याद रखना है कि उस समय इंडिया की मैक्सिमम पॉपुलेशन इट वॉज डिपेंडेंट ऑन द एग्रीकल्चर, and the second largest population was dependent on various cottage and the handicraft industries. हमारे इंडिया में बहुत सारे लोग आफ्टर एग्रीकल्चर दे वर एंगेज्ड इन द हैंडीक्राफ्ट एंड द कॉटेज इंडस्ट्रीज फॉर द लाइवलीहुड. बट व्हाट हैपन ड्यूरिंग द इंडस्ट्रियल रिवोल्यूशन इन द ब्रिटेन, they have developed so many industries in their countries, and because of that industrial development वहाँ पर हमारे इंडिया से रॉ मटेरियल वो इम्पोर्ट करते थे. That imported raw material they were converting into the finished goods, and after finishing this goods into the product, and then they were sent back to the India. Because of this what was happening कि यहाँ पे जो इंडस्ट्रीज़ में काम करने वाले लोग हुआ करते थे, कॉटेज इंडस्ट्रीज़ एंड हैंडीक्राफ्ट इंडस्ट्रीज़ में, उनका एम्प्लॉयमेंट यहाँ पर ख़त्म हुआ. हाउ इट हैज़ बिकम, बिकॉज यहाँ से रॉ मटेरियल ब्रिटेन लेके जा रहे थे, वहाँ पर उसको फिनिश गुड्स में कन्वर्ट करके फिर से वही फिनिश गुड्स इंडिया में बेच रहे थे. While doing this, the British goods were of the cheaper quality. वो इंडिया में ब्रिटिश गुड्स सस्ते दामों में बेचते थे. Now, why they were able to sell these products at the lower prices? It was because the Britishers were manufacturing the goods in the industries. और इंडस्ट्रियल गुड्स ये बहुत अच्छे क्वालिटी के भी होते हैं और वो लार्ज क्वालिटी में प्रोड्यूस होने की वजह से उनका कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन कम आता है. So because of that, the British goods in Indian market were cheaper as well as of good quality, and because of that, those cottage industries and the handicraft industries which were working in India, now their products were not sold in the Indian market only, and because of that, the industries, cottage industries and the handicraft industries workers, they became unemployed. So this is the third important economic cause of the uprising of 1857. And because of this decay of the cottage and handicraft industries, there was the growing unemployment in India. बहुत सारे लोग जो थे, हज़ारों लोग जो थे, इनके एम्प्लॉयमेंट ख़त्म हो गए थे. And because of that, the economic crisis had been increased, the people had become very very poor, poverty has been increased, economic decline of peasantry was one of the important point. कल्टिवेटर्स ये जो होते थे उनके ऊपर बहुत सारे इफेक्ट्स हुए थे. यहाँ पर इंडिगो कल्टिवेशन किया जा रहा था, जो कि फोर्स किया जा रहा था इंडियन लोगों को टू कल्टिवेट द इंडिगो, बिकॉज इट वाज नीडेड फॉर द ब्रिटिश इंडस्ट्रीज एज द रॉ मटेरियल. दे वर फोर्सिंग द इंडियन peasants to cultivate those crops which are used as the raw material for the British industries. So because of this, there were the various other causes also. Because of that, the poverty has been increased in India. So these are the important points which are related to the economic causes of uprising of 1857. Fourth and the last cause of the uprising is the military cause. In this cause, we are going to discuss that the Indian soldiers who were serving in the British army, they were not happy with the Britishers. इन लोगों को सिपाही कहा जाता था. इट वॉज द इंग्लिश प्रोनाउंसिएशन ऑफ सिपाही. हिंदी सिपाही जो हुआ करता था उसका इंग्लिश प्रोनाउंसिएशन हुआ करता था सिपाही, सिपाही. तो द सिपाहीज कॉज, दैट इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड एज द मिलिट्री कॉज. तो मिलिट्री कॉज में हम लोग देखेंगे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट दैट वाई द इंडियन सोल्जर्स वेर नॉट हैप्पी विद द ब्रिटिशर्स, सो दैट दे रोज इन टू द रिबिलियन. इसमें से फर्स्ट पॉइंट हम लोग देख रहे हैं इल ट्रीटमेंट ऑफ द टू द इंडियन सोल्जर्स. सी मैक्सिमम इंडियन सोल्जर्स वेर देर इन द ब्रिटिश आर्मी. ब्रिटिश आर्मी में सबसे ज़्यादा इंडियन सोल्जर्स हुआ करते थे, बट दे वर नॉट ट्रीटेड इक्वली विद द ब्रिटिश सोल्जर्स. द सोल्जर्स ऑफ इंडियन सोल्जर्स ऑफ ब्रिटिश आर्मी, दे वेर इल ट्रीटेड. उनको ट्रीटमेंट ठीक से नहीं दिया जाता था. इस वजह से वो जो सोल्जर्स थे, दे वर नॉट हैप्पी विद द ब्रिटिशर्स. Then in the year 1856, one law was passed That law was called as the General Services Enlistment Act. ये जनरल सर्विसेज एनलिस्टमेंट एक्ट क्या था? तो दिस वॉज द एक्ट विच वॉज पास ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ लॉर्ड कैनिंग. लॉर्ड कैनिंग वॉज द गवर्नर जनरल ऑफ दैट टाइम, एंड बाय दिस लॉ it was law has forced the Indian soldiers that to serve the overseas, which may high caste Hindus believed which would break their caste rules. ये क्या हुआ करता था जनरल सर्विसेज एनलिस्टमेंट एक्ट? तो इंडियन सोल्जर जो थे उनको ओवरसीज भेजा जाता था. सी अकॉर्डिंग टू द इंडियन ट्रेडिशंस, ओवरसीज जाना इंडियन ट्रेडिशंस में पर्टिकुलरली हाई कास्ट हिंदुज़म में ये अलाउ नहीं था. सो बट Britishers have forced them in the year 1856 by passing this act that they had to go to overseas also and seas cross करके दूसरे देशों में जाना है. ब्रिटिशर्स के लिए टेरिटरीज कैप्चर करनी है और जो टेरिटरीज कैप्चर हुए हैं उनको प्रोटेक्ट करना है. बट द इंडियन सोल्जर्स, दोज हु वर नॉट रेडी टू गो, इट वॉज लाइक they were forced, and because of that this was the another cause of the sepoys to rose into the rebellion. They rose into the rebellion. Then the another important cause of the soldiers was there were the bleak prospectus of the promotions. प्रमोशंस इंडियन सोल्जर्स को हायर पोस्ट पर नहीं दिया जाता था, उनको प्रमोशन एक तरीके से दिया ही नहीं जाता था. तो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द इंडियन सोल्जर्स वर नॉट गोइंग टू द हायर रैंक्स इन द ब्रिटिश आर्मी. सो बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द इंडियन सोल्जर्स वर नॉट हैप्पी विद द ब्रिटिशर्स. Then the deprivations of allowances. See, the Indian soldiers were not getting the various allowances. The Indian soldiers received a lower pay as well as the fewer allowances compared to the British soldiers. For example, ये allowances को उस समय हिंदी में कहा जाता था भत्ता. तो ये एक्स्ट्रा भत्ता जो होता था, एक्स्ट्रा अलाउंसेज जो होते थे, वो इंडियन सोल्जर्स को या तो नहीं दिए जाते थे या फिर दिए जाते तो वो भी बहुत कंपैरेटिवली ब्रिटिश सोल्जर्स के कंपैरिजन में बहुत कम दिए जाते थे. इस वजह से इंडियन सोल्जर्स को जो अलाउंसेज जो है वो ठीक से नहीं मिल पा रहे थे, एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दैट द इंडियन सोल्जर्स वेर नॉट हैप्पी विद द ब्रिटिशर्स. उसके साथ साथ उनके सैलरीज बहुत कम हुआ करती थी. सैलरीज इतनी कम हुआ करती थी कि वही जो ब्रिटिश सोल्जर्स जो हुआ करते थे उनके और इंडियन सोल्जर्स की सैलरीज में जो डिफरेंस हुआ करता था, इट वाज अराउंड 8 times. British soldiers were getting 8 times more salary than the Indian soldiers. So this was also one of the important point of the Indian soldiers who were discontented. Then there was a discrimination in the army. Indians were not promoted to the higher ranks and they faced the discrimination from the British officers. The treatment which was given, it was not good. इसी के साथ साथ एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट कॉज हुआ करता था, दैट वाज द लार्ज नंबर ऑफ इंडियन सोल्जर्स इन द ब्रिटिश आर्मी. द ब्रिटिश आर्मी हैड मेनी इंडियन सोल्जर्स बट a very few British soldiers, which made the rebellion easier to reorganize or organize, and because of that this was the fourth and the most important cause of the uprising. आप लोगों को याद रखना है कि अपराइजिंग की जो शुरुआत हुई थी दैट वाज स्टार्टेड बाय द मिलिट्री ओनली. तो ये मिलिट्री कैसे शुरुआत हुई थी, कैसे अपराइजिंग की शुरुआत हुई थी? तो इट वाज कंसिडर्ड एज द इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट, दैट इज द इमीडिएट कॉज. ये इमीडिएट कॉज होता क्या है? तो इट इज़ द कॉज बिकॉज ऑफ इट एक्चुअली द रिवोल्ट वॉज ट्रिगर्ड. रिवोल्ट की जो एक्चुअल शुरुआत हुई थी, इट वॉज बिकॉज ऑफ दिस कॉज एंड दैट इज कॉल्ड एज द इमीडिएट कॉज. It was the introduction of the Enfield rifles in the year 1856. Students, Britishers have introduced the new rifles in the army and it was given to the soldiers. That rifles were called as the Enfield rifles. Why these Enfield rifles were introduced and which were the rifles which were used before that till 1856? तो 1856 तक जो राइफल्स यूज़ हुआ करते थे उनको ब्राउन बेस या मस्कट्स कहा जाता था. उनका रेंज जो हुआ करता था वो कम हुआ करता था, बट बिकॉज ऑफ द मॉडर्नाइजेशन इन द वेपनरी सिस्टम द एनफील्ड राइफल्स वेर इंट्रोड्यूस, जिनकी रेंज वो मस्कट से ब्राउन बेस से बहुत ज़्यादा हुआ करती थी. तो ये नए राइफल्स इंडियन सोल्जर्स के लिए इंट्रोड्यूस किए गए. बट व्हाट हैपन, देयर वाज द रूमर इन द आर्मी दैट द कार्ट्रिजेस विच आर यूज्ड फॉर दिस राइफल्स, ये जो कार्ट्रिजेस आप लोगों को इमेज में दिख रहे हैं, ये कार्ट्रिजेस ऐसे बनाए गए हैं कि जिसका जो पेपर हुआ करता था, उसका कवर जो हुआ करता था, इसके लिए ग्रीस यूज़ किया जाता था. एंड इट वाज द रूमर इन द बंगाल रेजिमेंट अबाउट द कार्ट्रिजेस इन January 1857 दैट these cartridges are greased with, or that ointment or the grease which was used, it is made up of the fats of cows and pigs. ये रूमर फैल गया. एंड बिकॉज ऑफ दिस The new Enfield rifle cartridges were rumored to be greased with the cow and the pig fat. Soldier had to bite them before loading in the rifle, which hurt the religious feelings of both Hindus and the Muslim sepoys. ये जो कार्ट्रिजेस यहाँ पर दिख रहे हैं, इसको दांत से तोड़कर ये राइफल में लोड किया जाते थे। और ये आप लोगों को जैसे बताया गया है कि काउज एंड द पिग्स, जैसे cows are sacred in Hinduism, so it was hurting the religious sentiments of the Hindu soldiers, and the pigs are tabooed in Islam. So the Muslim soldiers are also were not happy with the cartridges, and because of that they refused to use the cartridges. One incident happened because of the use of these cartridges. Mangal Pandey, the soldier, one of the soldiers of the British army, who was working in the British army, and on February 26, 1857, the 19th Native Infantry at Behrampur in Bengal, they refused to accept the cartridges given to them. तो इन लोगों ने cartridges use करने से मना कर दिया. The regiment was disbanded as a warning to the other regiments. इन लोगों को disband किया गया, and it was like we can say warning to the other regiments that they should not do the disrespect of the orders of the British officers. The sepoys feared the loss of their caste and the religion if they accepted the grease cartridges. ये इस तरीके से हुआ करता था कि हम लोगों का धर्म जो है ये भ्रष्ट हो जाएगा अगर हम लोग ये ग्रीस कार्ट्रिजेस यूज़ करते हैं जो कि बने हैं ग्रीस से, जो बनता है बाय यूजिंग द फैट्स ऑफ काउज एंड द पिग्स. सो द इंडियन सोल्जर्स आर रिफ्यूज टू यूज़ दिस कार्ट्रिजेस. और जैसे हम लोगों ने अभी डिस्कस किया कि एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस द इंडियन सोल्जर्स वेर नॉट हैप्पी. सो वन ऑफ द इंडियन सोल्जर एट द Barakpur, he was Mangal Pandey, a sepoy. He led an attack on adjutant of the 34th Native Infantry at Barakpur on March 29, 1857. तो उसने अपने सीनियर के ऊपर गोली चला दी. And because of this, he was punished. He was court-martialed and he was hanged on 8th April 1857. Now see, when this soldier was hanged, and he was just fighting against the Britishers for not to use the cartridges because it was hurting the religious sentiments of the Indians, and they will lose their religion, and because of that they have denied it. But they were punished, like the Mangal Pandey was hanged on April 8, 1857. So because of that, the other soldiers also were not happy with this, and the Mangal Pandey has become the martyr for them, and because of that, the other soldiers also have started the revolt of 1857. So when Mangal Pandey was hanged on 8th April 1857, the news of this event in Bengal spread like a wildfire. ये जो न्यूज़ थी ये पूरी वाइल्डफायर के जैसे पूरी इंडिया में स्प्रेड हो गई. On May 9th, 85 sepoys of the Meerut, they refused to use the cartridges on the parade ground. They were sentenced to 10 years rigorous imprisonment. तो इन लोगों को ये कार्ट्रिजेस यूज़ नहीं करने मना करने की वजह से इनको 10 साल के लिए इम्प्रिजन भेज दिया गया, उनको जेल में भेजा गया. So on May 10th, all the sepoys at Meerut rushed to the jail and they set free their comrades and other convicts. तो उन्होंने जेल के ऊपर अटैक कर दिया और बाकी जेल में जो भी कुछ कन्विक्ट्स थे या कॉमरेड्स थे जो उनके सपोर्टर्स थे उनको वहाँ से निकाला गया. And because of that, the next day morning they reached to the Delhi, and that was the actual beginning of the uprising of 1857. So these were the causes of the uprising of 1857. Then the next important point of this chapter is the consequences of the first war of independence. यानी कि इस वॉर ऑफ इंडिपेंडेंस के रिजल्ट्स क्या हुए, कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस क्या हुए या इफेक्ट्स क्या हुए, या फिर हम लोग उसको आफ्टर मैथ भी बोल सकते हैं. So first point we are going to discuss as a consequence is the end of the company's rule. See students, this company, that is the British East India Company, which has ruled India for around more than 100 years, the end was there of this company's rule, and the Britishers took over the administrative power in their hands. This was done by the Government of India Act of 1858, which had the following provisions. British Parliament has passed one act called as the Government of India Act of 1858. So by this act, the British East India Company rule was ended and the British Parliament took over the Indian administration. So what were the provisions of this act? The first point, transfer of power from company to the British Crown. कंपनी का जो पावर था, कंपनी अब तक जो रूल कर रही थी 1857 तक, 1858 तक, नाउ द ब्रिटिश क्राउन यानी कि ब्रिटिश किंग अभी इंडिया का रूलर बन जाएंगे. उस समय इंडिया में ब्रिटेन में ब्रिटिश क्वीन थी इंस्टेड ऑफ द क्वीन, सो शी बिकेम द एम्प्रेस ऑफ इंडिया. All powers were to be executed by the Secretary of the State for India, who was aided by a council. सेकेंड इंपॉर्टेंट प्रोविजन ये था कि इंडिया का जो एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन ड्यूरिंग द ब्रिटिश ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी रूल, इट वॉज द गवर्नर वॉज अपॉइंटेड बाय द कंपनी टू रूल or to take the decisions in India. But now as the company rule was ended, the British Parliament has made the second provision by this act that there was a new post created for the administration in India, that was the Secretary of the State for India. So he was assisted by a council also, and that council was having the various members who were supporting him. Secretary of State was a member of the British cabinet and was responsible to the Parliament. So who will become the Secretary of State for India? So it was the British cabinet ranked minister will be appointed as the Secretary of State for India, and he will be responsible to the British Parliament. Secretary of State was to be assisted by a 15-member India Council. So India Council बनाई गई, which was assisting the Secretary for the administration in India. So that was the first important point of the consequences. Second important point is the Queen Victoria's proclamation. जैसे मैंने अभी आप लोगों को बताया कि during this period when the British East India Company rule was ended and the British government took over the power of administration in India, that time Queen Victoria was the Queen of England. So she became the Queen of India also. It was made public at Allahabad on November 1st, 1858 by Lord Canning. Lord Canning was the first Viceroy of India which was appointed in India after the end of the company rule by the law which is called as the Government of India Act of 1858. The proclamation promised that the British government of India would, means what, इस प्रॉमिस जो दिया गया था क्वीन की तरफ से, अपना जो प्रोक्लेमेशन आया था, proclamation is nothing but the declaration. So declaration by the Queen which was done on the 1st November 1858 at Allahabad, she promised to the Indians. What promises were given? Number one, to follow a policy of non-interference in the social and the religious matters of Indians. So Queen declared that she will not interfere in the religious as well as the social matters of the Indians. As we have discussed, it was one of the cause of the uprising of 1857. She will treat all the subjects, that is Indians and the Europeans, as equal. जैसे हम लोगों ने देखा था, वन ऑफ द कॉज ऑफ द अपराइजिंग कि इंडियन जो लोग थे इनके साथ डिस्क्रिमिनेशन किया जा रहा था. नाउ शी डिक्लेयर्ड इट दैट द बोथ द सब्जेक्ट्स, दैट इज बोथ द पीपल, इंडियंस एज वेल एज यूरोपियंस, विल बी ट्रीटेड इक्वली. Then the third point is that they will grant a general pardon to all those who had taken part in the war of independence, except those who were found guilty of the murder of the British subjects. मतलब इसका ये होता है कि जिन लोगों ने अपराइजिंग में पार्टिसिपेट किया था उनको जो जेल में रखा गया था उनको छोड़ा जाएगा, बट उन लोगों को नहीं छोड़ा जाएगा दोज हु हैव बीन टेकन पार्ट इनटू द अपराइजिंग एंड दे डिड द वायलेंस विद द ब्रिटिशर्स. उन लोगों ने ब्रिटिश लोगों का, ब्रिटिश ऑफिसर्स का खून कर दिया था, तो ऐसे लोगों को नहीं छोड़ा जाएगा, बाकी सभी लोगों को छोड़ा जाएगा. दैट वाज द थर्ड पॉइंट. फोर्थ, टू डू इट्स बेस्ट टू एडवांस द इंडस्ट्रीज इन इंडिया. तो इंडस्ट्रीज़ जो है इंडिया के डेवलप किए जाएंगे. जैसे हम लोगों ने देखा था, इट वाज वन ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक कॉज कि इंडियन पीपल दे हैव लॉस्ट देयर एम्प्लॉयमेंट बिकॉज ऑफ द ब्रिटिश मेड गुड्स. So because of that she declared that even in India the industries will be developed. She will promote the work of public utility in India so as to ensure the material as well as the moral progress of the people of India. तो ये सभी प्रोक्लेमेशन किए गए थे. दैट वाज द सेकंड इम्पॉर्टेंट पॉइंट रिलेटेड टू द कॉन्सिक्वेंसेस. Third and the another important point related to the consequences or the effects of the uprising is the end of the Mughals and the Peshwas. आप लोगों को पता है मुग़ल रूल जो इंडिया में इस्टेब्लिश हुआ था बाय द बाबर, इट वाज एस्टेब्लिश इन द ईयर 1526. ही हैज़ स्टार्टेड हिज रूल इन इंडिया. तो वहाँ से लेके 1857 तक 1858 तक मुग़ल रूल इंडिया में चला. बट at the end of this war of independence, even the Mughal rule had been ended. Even the rules of the Peshwas also had been ended. See, it has ended the two most formidable foes of the British in India, that is the Marathas and the Mughals. आप लोगों को पता है, with the death of the Bahadur Shah, the Mughal dynasty came to an end. See, as the consequences of the uprising, as the Bahadur Shah has supported the revolters in the year 1857, so because of that he was punished. He was sent to the Brangun and there he was jailed there, and there itself he has died in the year 1862. तो उनके बाद मुग़ल एम्पायर जो था उनका कोई सक्सेसर नहीं रहा, तो मुग़ल एम्पायर केम टू एन एंड. इवन जो पेशवा थे उस समय के, तो पेशवा जो उस समय के थे, लास्ट पेशवा वॉज द नाना साहेब, एंड ड्यूरिंग द रिवोल्ट ऑफ 1857 ही हैज़ फ्लेड टू द नेपाल. while fighting with the British, he has fled to the Nepal after the failure of uprising, and because of that the Peshwa means last Peshwa was the Nana Sahib, so that he has also fled to the Nepal, and because of that there was no another Peshwa took over, and that's why there was the end of the Peshwas and the Mughals. Then there were the changes in the army also made. The fourth and the most important consequence of the uprising of 1857 we are going to discuss here is that the changes were made in the army. What changes were made in the army? That was the British army. As you know, we have discussed before only that in the British army maximum soldiers were the Indians only. So now they have made some changes in the army so that the another revolt should not happen. The Indian army was reorganized after 1858 in the following manners. क्या क्या चेंजेस किए गए, तो ये आप लोगों को इसी के ऊपर भी क्वेश्चन पूछा जाता है. The strength of the European troops increased to 65,000 and that of the Indians was reduced to 1,40,000. Students, आप लोगों को याद रखना है, till 1858 the number of Indian soldiers and the British soldiers, their ratio was very different. इंडिया जो ब्रिटिश आर्मी जो इंडिया में बनाई गई थी, इस ब्रिटिश आर्मी में इंडियन सोल्जर्स अराउंड 2,40,000 थे, एंड द ब्रिटिश सोल्जर्स वेर वेरी लेस, दे वेर अराउंड 44 to 45,000 ओनली. बट एज द अपराइजिंग वॉज हैपन, the Britishers have taken the decisions that the number of Indian soldiers will be reduced to 1,40,000 and the British soldiers will be increased to 65,000. So this was the first change made in the British army. Europeans were kept at the key geographical and the military positions. European soldiers जो थे उनको important positions पे रखा गया, important military positions as well as the geographical position जो थे, strategic position जो थे, वहाँ पर सिर्फ British officers को appoint किया गया. The earlier policy of the excluding the Indians from the officers corps was strictly maintained. इसके पहले भी इंडियन सोल्जर्स को हायर रैंक्स के नहीं भेजा जाता था, हायर रैंक्स प्रमोशन नहीं किया जाता था, बट अभी इसको और ज़्यादा स्ट्रिक्टली मेंटेन किया गया. द सोफिस्टिकेटेड वेपन्स एंड द अम्यूनिशंस वेर नेवर प्लेस्ड अंडर द चार्जेस ऑफ इंडियंस. जो मॉडर्न वेपन्स हुआ करते थे, जिसके अपराइजिंग ऑफ 1857 तक इनके जो इंचार्ज हुआ करते थे वो इंडियन इंचार्ज भी हुआ करते थे, बट नाउ दे वेर नॉट मेड द इंचार्ज ऑफ दिस अम्यूनिशन एंड वेपन्स. To avoid the another anti-British uprising, discrimination on the basis of the caste, region and the religion was practiced in the recruitment in the army. तो आर्मी में जो नए रिक्रूटमेंट किए जा रहे थे उनके वहाँ पर ये कास्ट बेस्ड रिक्रूटमेंट होने लगे. डिवीजन किया गया, इंडियन सोल्जर्स को अलग अलग डिविजन्स में डिवाइड किया गया. लाइक द डिफरेंट रेजिमेंट्स वेर मेड. यू मस्ट हैव हर्ड समवेयर लाइक द मराठा रेजिमेंट or the Sikh regiment, Jat regiment. Like this, the various regiments were formed on the basis of the religion so that the Indian soldiers will not be together. So students, this is all about the uprising of 1857. All main points are covered in this chapter. This will be revision for your board exam also, and this can be useful for the further studies also. So this is all about the uprising of 1857. Thank you.